Sri Gurudeen Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. So quick check, where did we end last time? Prem Kishore Prabhu, do you have?
Yeah, we should start with chapter 8, Prabhu.
Okay, so we completed the seventh chapter.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's start with the eighth chapter, which is a description of the character of Bharat Maharaj. There are 31 verses in the chapter, and very interesting chapter because even though it's titled as a description of the character of Bharat Maharaj, it details the downfall of Bharat Maharaj. And this is one of those pastimes that is extensively discussed by acharyas, by devotees, of how does a devotee of the caliber of Bharat Maharaj, in the seventh chapter it was described that he had reached the stage of Bhaya, how can he fall down? Right, so we'll discuss that when we reach the relevant part. So the flow of the chapter is essentially in the end of the previous chapter, we saw how Bharat Maharaj was a perfect ruler, the perfect emperor. And at the peak of his opulence, that his whole kingdom was completely dedicated to him. His children were dedicated to him. He was enjoying like a demigod, performing yagyas, having the opulence, like unparalleled opulence. He gave everything up, like stool. So he gave everything up, renounced everything, and goes to the Pulahal ashram. Pulahal ashram is described as on the banks of the river Gandaki, to do a devotional service there. Right, so that's the setting of it. So we'll begin with the first verse. So these verses are again in prose. So Sai Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Shishukadeva Goswami continued, my dear king, one day after finishing his morning duties, evacuating, urinating, and bathing, Maharaj Bharat sat down on the bank of the river Gandaki for a few minutes and began chanting his mantra, beginning with Omkar.
So 7 verses will describe Bharat Maharaj bringing the deer to the ashram. This is setting of the scene. Vishwanath Chakravarti, he summarizes that the 8th chapter will describe how Bharat Maharaj raised a fawn and meditated on it, attaining the body of the deer in his next life. And then Chakravarti Pad, he glorifies Krishna. That the Krishna is an ocean of cleverness, he says. Generally we say ocean of love or compassion. Here he says that Krishna is an ocean of cleverness. And how did he show his cleverness? That when Bharat Maharaj gave up his human body, Krishna protected his devotional service on his ongoing transmigration to a deer and the body of the Brahman. So the Lord showed his affection for his devotee by protecting him in the form of a deer, so that he would fall into the ocean of remorse in order to drown in the ocean of prema. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is very poetic. That's why he's known as an Rasika Acharya. And so he said that he would fall into the ocean of remorse so as to drown into the portion of prema. Right? And not only is he being poetic, as we will see later on, that there is a lot of tattva that is buried into these statements. Okay, next verse.
O king, while Bharat Maharaj was sitting on the bank of that river, a dove, being very thirsty, came there to drink.
Next verse.
While the dove was drinking with great satisfaction, a lion, which was very close, roared very loudly. This was frightful to every living entity, and it was heard by the dove.
Next verse.
By nature, the dove was always afraid of being killed by others, and it was always looking about suspiciously. When it heard the lion tumultuous roar, it became very agitated, looking here and there with disturbed eyes. The dove, although it had not fully satisfied itself by drinking water, suddenly leaped across the river.
Next verse.
Though was pregnant and it jumped out of fear, the baby deer fell from its womb into the flowing waters of the river.
Srila Prabhupada says that there is every chance of a woman having a miscarriage if she experiences some ecstatic emotion or is frightened. Pregnant woman should therefore be spared of all these external influences. So these verses are setting the scene that Bharat Maharaj, he was in his ashram, it was the morning time, he had done his morning duties, and he had sat down to meditate at that time in the rivers. So the ashrams were typically on the banks of a river. As we know in the Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, it is mentioned that there are places that are auspicious. One of the places that is auspicious is situated on the banks of a flowing river. So his ashram was there, and then it's mentioned. So doe is a female deer. So a female deer who was pregnant, was drinking water, and because the deer is widely hunted, not just by the lion, but there are many other carnivores. There are jackals and wolves and wild dogs and leopards. So by the arrangement of nature, deer is one of the most common hunted animal. So for that reason, they are constantly on the lookout for, and they really have no defense other than running. So there are some animals that can defend themselves. They either have bodily strength, or they have sharp horns. So they have some defense mechanism, but unfortunately the deer has nothing. So the only mechanism they have is to flee, which is why they're always looking for danger before the danger finds them. So that's what is described, that the nature of the deer is to constantly look around for danger. And when the lion roared, then the doe jumped out of fear and had a miscarriage. The baby deer fell into the flowing water. Okay, to the next verse.
Being separated from its flocks and distressed by its miscarriage, the black doe, having crossed the river, was very much distressed. Indeed, it fell down in a cave and died immediately.
So this completes the setting of the scene that the mother died. So the baby, the fawn, the baby deer that was born is typically taken care of by the mother. Not only did it fall into the water and was being flown away in the water, but there was no mother to take care. Also, the mother also died immediately, and this all is being witnessed by the king. So that's what we'll see in the next verse. We can read the next verse, Prabhu.
The great king Bharata, while sitting on the bank of the river, saw the small deer, bereft of its mother, floating down the river. Seeing this, he felt great compassion. Like a sincere friend, he lifted the infant deer from the wave and, knowing it to be motherless, brought it to his ashram.
So the scene is now being set. It's a poignant scene. And the reason it's being set in these verses is to give us a glimpse into the mind of Bharat Maharaj. Great king, great emperor. The nature of the king is protection. Nature of the king is to nurture those that nurture his citizens. That is the second nature. It becomes intrinsic to the king, especially if they're well situated. Prabhupada says nowadays they're not. So the nature of the rulers is to exploit. But during that time, the nature of the king was to protect. And the protection is more strong for those who are helpless. So if somebody can protect themselves, then okay. But the more the helpless the person is, the stronger is the desire to protect. So we see that the baby deer over here is completely helpless. So as a newborn infant, it has no ability to protect itself. And by nature, the protection comes from the mother, and the mother is dead. So we see this churning of compassion also in the first canto, when Narad Muni is sharing his previous life as a Dasi Putra. The outcome is a little different. So we see that Narad Muni was very much tied to his mother by the bonds of affection. So even though Narad Muni was a child, but he could see that his mother was dependent on him. So that bound him. And when his mother dies of a snake bite, the Narad Muni himself says that he feels relieved of it. And that might seem a little hard-hearted, that the person who was taking care of him, his own mother, one of the strongest bonds is that to the mother. She dies, and Narad Muni is sharing that he feels relieved. So he leaves without even performing the funeral rites of his mother. And so Srila Prabhupada comments that this is the way of Krishna to drag a sincere soul to spiritual life. In this verse, Prabhupada comments, the laws of nature work in subtle ways unknown to us. Maharaj Bharat was a great king, very advanced in devotional service. He had almost reached the point of loving service to the Supreme Lord, which means that he was almost at the point of prema. Let's say he's already been described as a Mahabhagavat at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. So almost at the point of mature Bhava Bhakti, almost at the point of prema. But even from that platform, he could fall into the material platform. So in a way, this is the quality of an acharya, that an acharya is not scared to speak boldly against prevailing sentiments. So in a more mundane setting, one may criticize Narad Muni, that what a selfish boy. At least he could have performed the funeral rites of his mother. At least he could have felt some sorrow at the passing of his loving mother. In a more mundane setting, people may appreciate the compassion of Bharat Maharaj, that there was a fawn without any protection, and he did the right thing to take it under its wing. In a mundane setting, people might criticize Krishna for inciting Arjun to fight. And this is actually factual, that there is criticism. If you remember, this happened in Russia when they wanted to ban ISKCON there. They used the Bhagavad Gita as the basis to ban. And the person who was speaking on behalf of so most of it was coming from the Catholic Church, who wanted to ban ISKCON. So the person on their behalf was also a scholar, a Gita scholar, not a devotee, but a Gita scholar. And he picked up so many quotes from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, so as you know, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, I think 7 or 9 times, he explicitly says that get up and fight, kill these people, vanquish or be vanquished. Right? So they were using it as a basis to show that this is a religion that promotes violence, that promotes killing one's own loved and dear ones. So it takes an acharya to speak boldly against prevailing sentiments. That material compassion is short-sighted and misplaced. Violence in the service of the Lord is not different from devotional service. So Prabhupada writes a powerful purport saying that spiritual salvation and liberation from material bondage must be worked out with great caution. Otherwise, a little discrepancy will cause one to fall down again into material existence. By studying the activities of Maharaj Bharat, we can learn the art of being completely freed from material attachment. Interesting statement, right? So here we see that Bharat is demonstrating material attachment. And Srila Prabhupada says that by learning it, we can understand how to be freed from material attachment. So that is what these exalted devotees do. That in order to teach us, they fall down, or they appear to fall down. One at the stage of Bhava has already perfected one's life. So Arjun went into illusion. Arjun was an eternal associate of Krishna. But in order to facilitate the speaking of the Gita, he went into illusion. So this is the compassion of devotees of the caliber of Bharat Maharaj. And Prabhupada mentioned this to make sure that we study this in proper perspective. It's not for us to criticize Bharat Maharaj. It's not for us to say that we are better than him or he had a deficiency in his character. But it is for us to learn the lessons that are being taught from it. That's the whole reason personalities like Bharat Maharaj and Krishna, our ever well-wisher, they are orchestrating all of this. So then Prabhupada speaks about specifically compassion. He says that we should be compassionate by raising one from the material platform to the spiritual platform. Right? This is a point Prabhupada often says. The real compassion is making sure that one does not have to take birth again. Otherwise, it's like blowing on the boil. That if there is a boil, there's a fire. If because of burn, there's a boil on the skin, then by blowing it, you get temporary relief. As soon as you stop blowing, the pain comes back manifold over. So similarly, material compassion is like blowing on the boil. Real compassion is compassion for the soul. Radhanath Maharaj, commenting on this, he notes that Maya Devi, she attacks the person at the weakest spot. Maharaj Bharat had no bad qualities. So if somebody had attraction for the opposite sex, then Maya Devi would attack in the form of a woman. And we see that happen with great personalities. In some cases, somebody has attraction for opulence, and Maya Devi attacks by offering the person either wealth or power or fame. So depending on where the weakest spot is, Maya Devi attacks. Bharat Maharaj had no bad qualities. He was at the Bhava stage. He was detached from material opulence. It is said that he gave it up like all his material opulence like stool. And Radhanath Maharaj comments that there are three qualities of when a person excretes stool. One is that there is no attachment to that. There is no residual attachment. The person does not say, oh, this was my stool, it was in my body, and it's still attached. So there's no residual attachment to the stool. You feel relief when you excrete it, and once you have given it up, you don't take it back. So in the same way, when Bharat Maharaj gave up all his material opulence, he felt relief that it's good. My kingdom, my family, I have given it up. He gave it in a way that there was no lingering attachment. There was no regret. That maybe I could have ruled for a little longer. Maybe I couldn't got my wife with me. Maybe I could have built my hut close to my palace and I could have seen once in a while. There was no regret in him. Right? And there was no desire in him to go back there. Right? So that's why this analogy is used to show real detachment, real renunciation from Bharat Maharaj. So where does Maya attack? He has no weakness, but his strength is that he is compassionate. So she uses that strength to attack Bharat Maharaj. He says that Maya does not care about her feeble attempts to chant. She is more concerned about her future qualities that may take us to Bhakti. So interesting point that sometimes we think that when our mind is wandering when we chant, we say that this is Maya Devi affecting us. But actually, Maya Devi she has no fear of her chanting. He said this is her feeble attempts to chant. She has no fear about her chanting. What is she concerned about? So just like a strategist, the strategist thinks several steps ahead. So like a strategist, she said that this is a quality in this person that in future may take him to Bhakti. And then she attacks that quality. So the point Maharaj is making is that the attack is very subtle. It is not head-on. It is not that you're performing devotional service by Shravan Kirtan and she attacks Shravan Kirtan, because that itself is weak. But then there is a person who may be inclined to Vaishnav Seva, who may have that attitude. That's a quality that concerns her. Or there may be a person who is inclined to helping others, to preaching. That's a quality that she will attack. Now, we can't speculate on especially when we are looking at ourselves. We can't speculate on what are the qualities, how is Maya Devi attacking us. But just knowing that the attack is so subtle and insidious that it will never be obvious is enough to make sure that we take all the possible defenses that we can. That's the point that Maharaj is making. Not for us to speculate that maybe this quality of mine is going to take me to Bhakti, and maybe Maya Devi will attack that quality, so this is what I should do. No, that's, we get into an area where we can never be, we can never clearly distinguish. But just knowing that the attack is so subtle and the attack is not head on. It is like in many of those branches of like Taekwondo or whatever, the way of dealing with the opponent is using the energy of the opponent against the opponent. I remember when my son was doing it when he was a child, then they would basically teach them moves like this, that don't take the other person head on, but when the person is coming like this, you move over here, mostly about pushing and using the person's energy against himself. So that's what might happen to us if we become important enough to get Maya Devi's attention. So the lesson for us is that all possible precautions that we can take, we should always take. Okay, verse 8.
Gradually, Maharaj Bharat became very affectionate toward the deer. He began to raise it and maintain it by giving it grass. He was always careful to protect it from the attack of tigers and other animals. When it itched, he petted it. And in this way, he always tried to keep it in a comfortable condition. He sometimes kissed it out of love. Being attached to raising the deer, Maharaj Bharat forgot the rules and regulations for the advancement of spiritual life. And he gradually forgot to worship the Supreme Person of Godhead. After a few days, he forgot everything about his spiritual advancement.
So this is the nature of love. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, we have this pastime where Sanatana Goswami once goes to meet with Mahaprabhu, and as he was traveling through the forest, he drinks some water that is contaminated, and because of that, his whole body is covered with sores, and they're oozing like some kind of pus. So he was so ashamed of his own body. It had a bad odor coming. It had this oozing substance. He would not go in front of Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu once, he came to Sanatana Goswami's kutir, and this was when he was contemplating giving up his body. And he forcibly embraces Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami is mortified. He's like, my body is most abominable at this time. I can't even bear to be in front of me. And you are forcibly taking me and embracing me. All this filth in my body is smearing on you. So what does Mahaprabhu says? That the oozing substance from your body is like nectar to me. That's the nature of love. Now, this is, of course, spiritual love, right? But we also see reflections of it in the material world. Like we see that specifically between a mother and a child, especially when the child is small and the child passes stool, everybody is disgusted by it. That it smells bad, stool is stool, it looks bad. Not the mother. The mother does not look at the appearance or the foul odor. She's happy, saying that, oh, look how well my child is eating and digesting food. She will happily clean the child. After she has cleaned the child, others will take the child. Generally, in between the father and mother, this happens, that the father is playing with the child, but when the child passes stool, the father immediately gives to the mother. The mother will clean the child nicely, give new set of clothes. Father again takes to start playing with the child. But the mother, out of love, is not even seeing the so-called disgusting aspect of the stool. That's the nature of Bharat Maharaj's compassion. He did not consider the abominable aspect of the attraction, that the deer is an animal and it is taking away from his bhakti. I've seen personally people who have pets like dogs or cats, and they will the dogs will be licking them on their face or even their mouth, and they're happy about it. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that this is pretty disgusting. That before the dog was licking your face, it was probably licking its own private parts, or it was drinking water from the ground or somewhere, and same mouth it is now licking your face, but the person is happy about it. Oh, what a sweet dog, nice dog. That's the nature of material love and compassion. That's we now see in Bharat Maharaj. That the deer is coming, and as we will see later on, it would personally come. So not only is Bharat Maharaj protecting the deer, which would have been, to some extent would have been okay. That yes, the deer has taken shelter of him, he's protecting the deer from the other animals. Not only is he feeding the deer, which could have been again okay, but he sometimes kissed it out of love. Being attached to the deer, he forgot the rules and regulation of the advancement of spiritual life. He forgot everything about his spiritual advancement. So Srila Prabhupada uses this as an opportunity to instruct us on how to remain fixed in bhakti. He says that from this we can understand how we have to be very cautious in executing our spiritual lives by observing the rules and regulations. So this is where the rules and regulations come to our protection. Because if we were to be simply directed by the pushings of our consciousness or our heart, then in one way or the other, we would follow that route. Maybe not a deer, maybe not a dog, but maybe children, maybe our car, maybe our job, maybe parents. So it is very difficult to discern this, that it apparently looks like it's the right thing to do, that it is coming from the platform of goodness. But the rules and the regulations, they protect us. So Prabhupada says, regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, rising early in the morning, bathing, attending Mangal Arati, worshipping the deity, studying the Vedic scriptures, following the rules prescribed by the acharyas and spiritual master. So once we do all this, then the protection is automatic. We don't have to do a lot of mental gymnastics ourselves. Now, interestingly, Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavad Gita that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should not be given up, but should be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great soul. Now, two ways to understand this verse. One is that Bharat Maharaj is sacrificing his own welfare for the welfare of the deer. And he could say, this is what Krishna says, that one should not sacrifice. So I'm sacrificing my own personal welfare. following of the scriptural rules and regulations for the welfare of the deer. And this will purify, Krishna says, even the great soul. Then Prabhupada explains that one should understand the tattva behind the statement. The point that is made over here is that one should never give up the foundational principles of an endeavor. So it's like sometimes in ISKCON, this is more in humor. A devotee would say that I am so renounced that I have renounced renunciation, and which means that I'm not renounced anymore because I've renounced renunciation. And you could, from a rigorous analytical perspective, you could say yes, renunciation means giving up objects that you like. If one is attached to renunciation, they give up renunciation. But what is the fault? That such statement, of course, this one is in humor, but the point Prabhupada is making that one should always understand the underlying tattva. That one should never give up the foundational principles of an endeavor. So just like piety should not be given up by those who are beyond the need of piety. A devotee should not give up regulative principles of bhakti even if he is beyond the regulative principles of bhakti. Right? So that's the point being made by Krishna in this verse. The sacrifice, charity, and penance should not be given up even by the great soul. Similarly, the regulative principles of bhakti should not be given up by even those who are advanced devotees. Like Bharat Maharaj has already been established as an advanced devotee. But that is the protection that he has, is to continuously take shelter of the regulative principles. So Prabhupada says that even if one is in the renounced order, he should never give up regulative principles. He should worship the deity and give his time and life to the service of Krishna. He should also continue following the rules and regulations of austerity and penance. These things cannot be given up. One should not think oneself very advanced simply because one has accepted the sannyas order. So it's interesting that Prabhupada speaks about the sannyas order. Generally he speaks about others, but here he's talking about those who are renounced. And Prabhupada demonstrated in his own life that he was a sannyasi, but he was very fixed in following what he said in terms of chanting the prescribed number of rounds, reading the scriptures, deity worship. He didn't worship deity personally, but worshipping the deities in the temples. Very, very fixed in his following of the regulative principles. Otherwise, there's a class of people who are called avaduts. And avaduts are basically those who have advanced to the point where they have no need for regulative principles. Like sometimes Nityanand Prabhu is called avadut. Now, in his case, he's genuinely an avadut. He's personality of Godhead. He has transcended the needs of regulative principles. There are people who are at that stage. In a genuine case, the transcending of the regulative principle happens as a byproduct. So they don't sit down and think that now I'm so advanced, I don't have to chant. But what happens is that because they're chanting all the time, they don't have to chant a prescribed number of rounds. Because they're so busy in performing some anga of bhakti, they neglect other angas of bhakti. Right? So it happens as a byproduct. If they don't cultivate that, the giving up of the prescribed principles. Okay, verse 9.
The great king Maharaj Bharat began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now lost its relative and friend, and has taken shelter of me. It does not know anything but me, as I have become its father, mother, brother, and relative. This deer is is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anything but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer, my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. That would be a great fault.
So verses 9, 10, and 11, they describe the anatomy of attachment. Bharat Maharaj, of course, but in general, they describe the anatomy of attachment. So it is said that giving shelter is much more dangerous than taking shelter. Because when you're taking shelter and you take false shelter, then it can be the cause of your downfall. But when you're giving shelter and you're giving shelter fall down, you also fall down along with it. So we see that in the case of Bharat Maharaj, that he's giving shelter. So even in general interactions, the person who takes the role of protecting others, providing for others, nurturing others, is much more likely to become materially absorbed than the person who is on the receiving end of it. So that is described over here. We can see Sukadeva Goswami doing a psychological analysis of Bharat Maharaj. He is using the thoughts of Bharat Maharaj to demonstrate it. So Bharat Maharaj, he did not blindly fall into this position, but he did with complete guidance of the mind. Right? So we see that he's thinking. It's not one of those things that happened and he did not realize it. He deliberated about it. Not only did he deliberate it, he took shelter of the scriptures also. Right? We see over here that he's saying that I should not be envious. That he's quoting the fact that the deer is a victim of the personality of Godhead in the form of time and has taken shelter of me. So the scriptures say that if somebody takes shelter of you, it is your duty to protect it. So that's why he says that if it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Now one might say, go ahead and neglect it. And then he says that if I neglect it, then I am envious. That would be a great fault. Right? So then he's saying that he's having this conversation with himself. That I know that by giving shelter to the deer, my spiritual life will be impacted. So knowingly, he is pursuing that path. This is what happens in the life of practicing devotees also. They don't fall out of bhakti. They steer themselves out of bhakti knowingly. They go through this thought process that this is important, that is important, but this is also important. That part of the scripture says. Sometimes devotees do this, that they will ask only particular people for particular things which substantiate their own conception. So they use that to reinforce their own paradigm. So what is Bharat Maharaj thinking here? He is saying that the deer is faultless. It's a child. So the deer is faultless. Then he says that this arrangement has been made by the Lord. So he sees Krishna's hand over here. And what is the third thing that he is seeing? that I am the only shelter of the deer. There's nobody else over here. If I do not give shelter to the deer will die. It will be hunted by another animal or it will starve to death. So not giving shelter to a helpless person, especially for a Kshatriya, is considered to be a great fault. We see in Mahabharata, right? When in the episode where Maya Danav, when Krishna and Arjuna are burning, what's the name of the forest? Khanda forest, right? And Maya Danav comes running out and takes shelter of Arjuna. And Krishna pursues him, trying to kill him, and Arjuna, he's willing to fight with Krishna, his own best friend, benefactor, saying that Maya has taken shelter of me. So as a Kshatriya, it's my duty to protect him. Right? So Bharat Maharaj, he's a king and a Kshatriya. So what does he think about the deer? Deer is helpless, forced by time, alone, taken my shelter, totally dependent on me, and has full faith on me. Now, how does he reflect on himself? He says that I should be non-envious. I should be selfless. I should raise, protect, gratify, and fondle the deer. So you see how the curve is being extrapolated. And he could just say that I will protect the deer and leave it at that. But no, he says not only do I have to protect it, I have to gratify it also. I have to fondle it also. So he is taking one step in the wrong direction. The momentum is now carrying him. And then he says that although disturbing my spiritual life, I still need to take care of the deer. So Prabhupada in the purport, he notes, and after this I'll stop for some discussion. Prabhupada in the purport, he notes that that a spiritually advanced person is naturally compassionate to everyone. And then he says that the compassion is properly placed for the spiritual welfare and not exclusively to material welfare. Right? So note the word exclusively. So it's not that when one is spiritually placed, one becomes stoic or one becomes totally impervious to one's other person's material suffering. There's so much prasadam distribution that is done to hungry people. There's Bhaktivedanta hospital. So it's not that the person becomes completely indifferent to other person's suffering. That would be a fault. But the person is not exclusively focused on the material welfare. Material welfare is wherever possible paired with the spiritual welfare. The material welfare becomes a part of the spiritual welfare. Like if you see videos of prasadam distribution, especially in schools, then they also have chanting of the holy name. Or there are in the hospital, of course, everywhere around there is Krishna, there is preaching going on, there is book distribution being going on. So yes, material welfare is being looked after, but along with spiritual welfare. So then the question is that how does one deal with material adversity? The Prabhupada says that as far as material distress is concerned, one should be equipoised. And so here he's talking about one's own material distress and distress of those around. So being equipoised means that one does not become bewildered by material adversity. It does not mean that one does not address material adversity when it happens, whether to the self or the others, but one does not become bewildered by it. Like the case of Bharat Maharaj, right? He saw material adversity in the deer and he became bewildered by it. He could have protected the deer without having given up his spiritual practices, right? Or even if the deer had gone, had for whatever reason went away, he could have been equipoised about it. But not being equipoised about material adversity is what eventually causes spiritual downfall. So Prabhupada says that as far as the material body is concerned, we cannot do anything for anyone. Why? Because that's the nature of material body. Jatasya dhruvam mrityu, dhruvam mrityu, jatasya. Everything that is born dies, and everything that dies takes birth again. Then he says, however, by the grace of Krishna, we may raise a person to spiritual consciousness if we ourselves follow the rules and regulations. So the whole pastime of Bharat Maharaj is, not the whole pastime, but the main message in the Bharat Maharaj pastime is following of rules and the importance of following rules and regulations, regardless of whatever state of advancement we are. Okay, so let me pause here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I was thinking about this verse where Krishna said the wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Sometimes it's difficult to do that, because when we read about compassion and how in this context, I know, but it's difficult.
I agree with you, Prabhu. It is easier said than done, and that's why the adherence to rules and regulations, regardless, is important. So our mind may not cooperate. We may think that there are other things that we can do. We can make better use of our time. And that's fine. That's the nature of the mind. But if you make this resolve that regardless we follow rules and regulations, then they will protect us.
As if do it with detachment.
Yes. As we're doing with detachment, these are things that are aspirational. They're difficult to achieve, but they are there so that we can cultivate them. Bit by bit, we can cultivate them. So detachment to small things, that builds our detachment muscles. Somebody cuts us off on the road. Instead of getting angry, we say, that's okay, so be it. Somebody is rude to us. Instead of feeling frustrated, we say, probably we were rude to the person. One less karma. So we build our detachment muscles. And then when bigger things happen, life-changing events happen, then we can start relying on those muscles that we have built by practice over a lifetime.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Good point. Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Sorry, Prabhu. One thing that I was wondering is, Bharat Maharaj has attained Bhava Bhakti stage. Even at that stage, he is attacked by Maya. I was under the impression that devotee of that caliber will be directly under the protection of Krishna, or whatever that comes is Krishna's arrangement rather than Maya's arrangement. So how is am I right or am I wrong, or what's the right way of understanding? I mean, Bhagavad obviously says Maya, but I'm just telling.
Both statements are correct. That devotees at that level are under the protection of Krishna, but they can still be attacked by Maya. Both statements are correct. And we'll see how Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad resolve this. I think in the 18th verse, if you're able to reach that today, there's a fairly, that's where the whole pastime comes together from a philosophical basis. So these questions that you ask are asked, rhetorically they're asked. Exactly the same question you're asking. At the Maya stage, Krishna's protection, Neha Bikamanashasti Pratvayo Navidyate, that Krishna says that little bit of devotion protects you from the greatest downfall. Prabhupada says that you at least get a human form of life. There's a little bit of devotion, right? Sadhana stage, he's at Baba stage. How did he get a dear body? Should have at least gotten a human form of life. So all these things will come together when we discuss in that verse.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll continue with verse 10.
Even though one is in the renounce order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important, to protect one who has surrendered.
So earlier Bharat Maharaj was considering that his actions are for the benefit of the deer. And the deer has no protection, etc., etc. Now he's considering that these actions are actually for his own benefit. Right? So we see how subtle but pervasive the consciousness changes. So he's saying that one has to protect one that has surrendered to him. Now, factually speaking, the deer never surrendered to Bharat Maharaj. It circumstantially happened to be in the vicinity of his ashram. But the deer never came to Bharat Maharaj and said that I take shelter of you, please protect me. So all this paradigm that he is building is based on a false premise. Right? So there is this branch of Nyaya that talks about this way of thinking, that your premise is incorrect, but the conclusions that you draw are accurate with respect to the premise. Right? So it's like that you go to somebody and say that you're a thief. And then you say the thief needs to be punished, the thief needs to be arrested, being a thief is a bad thing, it's morally decrepit. All these are valid things. But the premise that the person is a thief is incorrect. So this form of logic, it is very convincing, because out of the 10 things, the 9 things that you say are correct. That yes, the thief needs to be punished, right? The person says, right. Stealing from others' property is immoral, right? Yeah, right. So the 9 things are correct. The only one thing that is lost in this crowd is that, is the person really a thief? So Bharat Maharaj is following that logic, that he is basing the whole his whole need for protection on the premise that this deer has surrendered to me. So this is known as Atmaman Manyate Jagate. That what I think is how the world is. Atmama Manyate. What I think is the world. Right? So it is disconnected from reality. So people become so attached to their object of affection that they often mistakenly consider that the object is also equally attached to them. So, little bit of trivia, where do we see a lot of this happen?
Family relationship.
See, family relations, but I was being a little bit more, I guess, humorous. It often happens amongst young men and women and girls. So the young man will look at a girl and he will think that just like he's attracted to her, she's attracted to him. And they will never think anything else. So they will never consider for a moment that the girl has no interest in him. Just because he's interested in the girl, he's fully convinced that the girl is interested in him. Somebody says she's not interested in him. Say, no, she's just shy. Say, no, she really does. The girl comes and says, I'm not interested in you. Oh no, she's just playing hard to get. Right? So this is the Atmavan Manyate Jagate. That what they think, they assume is true. So Bharat Maharaj thought that as I am attached to the deer is attached to me. Now later on in the past time, we'll see that the deer goes away. And he just leaves Bharat Maharaj and goes away. It has no attraction for Bharat Maharaj. Now, Sukdev Goswami does not reveal that the deer went away because for what reason. But we see that when Bharat Maharaj is giving up his life, then the deer comes back. So he went away, not because he was captured by somebody or he died, he just went away. He had no attraction for Bharat Maharaj, or maybe some attraction, but not to the extent that Bharat Maharaj had it. But in Bharat Maharaj's mind, there was no question about it. This deer has surrendered to me. This deer loves me. This deer needs my protection. Right? So Prabhupada here says that for our instruction, Bharat Maharaj acted in such a way. We should be very careful not to be misled by so-called welfare activities conducted in a bodily terms. Because we know that practically speaking, the most difficult people to preach to are the people who are strongly in the mode of goodness. People who are charitable, people who are pious, people who are following some kind of regulations. Why? Because they're drawing a lot of shelter, a lot of sustenance from there. For one who's in the mode of passion and ignorance, they're suffering. Especially in the mode of passion, they're suffering. Mode of ignorance, they're suffering, but they don't know. Mode of passion, they're suffering and they're aware of it. They're more open to it. So Prabhupada says that one should be very careful not to be misled by so-called welfare activities. Right? And again, the focus here is exclusive material activities. Right? So Prabhupada says that Maya is very strong in the name of philanthropy, altruism, and communism. People are feeling compassion for suffering humanity throughout the world. So such people, what they do is they will neglect or deride the spiritualist as, sometimes they will say they are escapists, that they're trying to escape the challenges of the material world and they put their head into the spiritual sand. Or they say they're selfish, that they just look for themselves and not for others. Or they say they're bewildered. Right? So all of you must have faced people coming to you and complaining, especially in India, that I had this one person come to me saying that I heard that the dresses for the deities, they cost lakhs of rupees. I said, yes. And he says, how can you consciously support that when there are lakhs of people who are dying of hunger and you're spending this money just to put dress on idols? How can you support that? Right? Why? Because of this misplaced compassion. Prabhupada would say what they don't realize is that when you serve the deity, then everybody is being nourished there. So we see that Narad Muni, so this is in the 13th chapter of the first canto. Narad Muni gives similar instructions to Yudhishthira Maharaj. When Yudhishthira Maharaj is lamenting that Dhritarashtra has gone away, Vidur comes and preaches. Overnight, Vidur and Dhritarashtra, they disappear. And then Yudhishthira Maharaj is lamenting, oh, where has he gone? He's blind. He's in the forest. He will die. Narad Muni comes and first chastises Yudhishthira Maharaj, saying that, who do you think you are? You think you are protecting Dhritarashtra? You think you are his caretaker? That is the first illusion that you have. Right? And then he talks about how with or without protection, everybody sooner or later becomes food for somebody else. Right? So nobody can actually give protection. One question over here maybe can be also asked is that why cannot Bharat Maharaj be considered as helping the deer make spiritual advancements? Bharat Maharaj, one would say Bharat Maharaj was a great devotee, and by his association, the deer was also making spiritual progress. The Prabhupada comments that not possible in the animal form of life. And there was, so we know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, he can do it, but not possible in the animal form of life to make spiritual progress. And if Bharat Maharaj was indeed wanting to help the deer make spiritual progress, he would have made sure that he was making more progress. Then only he could have helped the deer make progress. So it's just one of those debating questions. Okay. Let's move on to verse 11.
Due to attachment for the deer, Maharaj Bharat lay down with it, walked about with it, bathed with it, and even ate with it. Thus his heart became bound to the deer in affection.
So the nature of affection is that it begins with a concept and then it manifests into action. So initially we see that Bharat Maharaj was conceptually attached to the deer, thinking that this deer has taken shelter of me, that it is my duty to protect the deer. So that is his mental conception. Now in this verse we see how is it manifesting into action, that he is lying down with it, he's walking with it, he's bathing with it, he is even eating with it. So we know that we go through this process of thinking, feeling, willing, and doing. That's what is happening over here. The pastime of Bharat Maharaj is a little special, or the so-called fall down of Bharat Maharaj is a little special because of the stature of Bharat Maharaj and the nature of his attraction. So the scriptures talk about other fall downs also. So previously Rishabdev had talked about the double knot of attraction. Like, does anybody remember what the double knot of attraction Rishabdev talks about?
Yeah, it's mostly between a man and a woman.
Exactly. So he says that the double knot is difficult because if one knot is opening, the other knot is still holding. But in case of Bharat Maharaj and deer, it's not a double knot, it's a single knot. The deer is no attachment for Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj is the one who's holding on to the deer, right? And this is a Mahabhagavat. This is a person who is at a Bhava stage. He has already overcome so many double knots. Right? So Bharat Maharaj had a beautiful wife. He gave her up. He had adoring children. He had given them. He had citizens who had worshipped him. He given them up. All these are double knots, where they are holding to Bharat Maharaj and Bharat Maharaj is holding to them. And he had given all this up. After having given all this up, now he is getting bound by a single knot. His attraction to an object that is incapable of reciprocation. Right? So Bharat Maharaj is imagining a lot of reciprocation, but it's not factually there. Right? So all the more important for one to be aware of the nature of attraction. One should not think that this is an inanimate object. So I can be attracted to it and give it up at any point I want. here we see even an attraction. Deer is not inanimate, but it is not capable of reciprocation. Even an attraction in this situation can be the cause of a downfall of one who is as elevated as Bharat Maharaj. This is one reason why Srila Prabhupada would discourage devotees from having pets. Two reasons he would go. One is this, that one becomes too attached to the pets. And same thing happens, that you sleep with the pet, you eat with the pet, you walk with the pet, and you develop the pet mentality. So you give up your spiritual practices. And the second Prabhupada would say is just the contamination, that they're animals. The animals live the way they are. So by nature, where animals are living, in older times, the animals never entered the house. They always lived outside the house. Even animals like cows that are considered to be more of goodness, they would live outside the house. Current day and age, they live in the house. They're on your bed or they're on your chair. So like Prabhupada would say that when you're making an offering, the dog does not know that this is meant for the Lord. It will look at it with a dog mentality. It will salivate, it will say, oh, it is for me. Let me eat it. Right? So in this way, the offering gets contaminated, or they may physically contaminate it. Okay, moving on to the next verse, 12.
When Maharaj Bharat wanted to enter the forest to collect kusha grass, flowers, wood, leaf, fruits, roots, and water, he would fear that dogs, jackals, tigers, and other ferocious animals might kill the deer. He would therefore always take the deer with him when entering the forest.
So Prabhupada says that since this was the case with Bharat Maharaj, what can we say of those who are not advanced in spiritual life, but who become attached to cats and dogs? Due to their affection for the cats and dogs, they have to take the same bodily form in the next life. Unless they clearly increase their affection and love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless we increase our faith in the Supreme Lord, we shall be attracted to many things. That is the cause of material bondage. It's another danger. If you are attracted to your pets, you think of them when you're dying. And just like Bharat Maharaj, he thought of the deer when he was dying, he became a deer. So could happen to anyone else. I know there are some devotees who get pets and then they give them like spiritual names. I know one devotee who had a dog and then she called her dog Narsingadev. And there's devotee who had cats and they called the dogs Radha Krishna. So there was like, through them I am remembering Krishna, saying the name of Krishna, remembering Krishna. So these are all subtle things. Yes, you are taking the name of the Lord. But at the same time, if you're actually looking at the dog in relationship with Narsingadev, fine. But more often than not, it's the other way around. Right? You're seeing Narsingadev in relationship to dog. Dog becomes your primary point of attraction. But it's a sensitive point because I do see now more and more devotees, at least the ones that are taking on pets, especially children, those who have children, because in this country, children are very attracted to pets. So they take on pets and the pets become like family members. So to say that this pet could be a cause of your spiritual downfall, it kind of closes the door for further conversation with that person. Okay, let's move on, verse 13.
When entering the forest, the animal would appear very attractive to Maharaj Bharat, due to its childish behavior. Maharaj Bharat would even take the deer on his shoulder and carry it due to affection. His heart was so filled with great love for the deer that he would sometimes keep it on his lap or when sleeping on his chest. In this way, he felt great pleasure in fondling the animal.
So Maharaj Bharat, he had renounced a loving family, the kingdom and citizens to practice spirituality. And now we see that he's attracted to a very small portion of what he had renounced. Like it's like somebody renounces a boat full of coins, gold coins, saying, I have no interest in them, take them away. But then there is one small piece of the coin that somehow stays. And then he becomes attracted to that coin. So Prabhupada says that what was the use of renouncing his family? One who is serious in advancing in spiritual life should be very cautious not to become attached to anything but Krishna. Sometimes in order to preach, we have to accept many material activities. But we should remember that everything is for Krishna. If you remember this, there is no chance of her being victimized by material activities. Right? So Prabhupada makes this point that more important than renouncing something is renouncing the desire for that something. And he says that, so Prabhupada was sometimes criticized that as a sannyasi, you should have no material attraction. And Prabhupada sometimes wore Rolex watches, he flew in jet planes, and lived in relatively opulent settings, drove around in motor cars. All these things are not recommended for renunciates. And Prabhupada makes this point that what's the point in renouncing all of them if you still get, if the attraction to them is still there. And there's this famous pastime of Shripad. After that, I'll stop. I don't think I'll be, which is okay. I think the verse that kind of unfolds the philosophy of this, it needs substantive amount of time. So I'll end with this pastime of Shripad Ramanujacharya, that he had a Grahastha couple as his disciples, and they were very opulent. And Shripad Ramanujacharya was very fond of them. So he had other disciples who were renunciates, who were sannyasis. And they became a little envious because in spiritual hierarchy, renunciates are at a higher platform. So when Ramanujacharya heard of this, then he arranged for us little trick to reveal it. He told one of his disciples that when his sannyasi disciples go to take bath, then they would switch their coffins as the loincloth, their underwear that they wear. So the sannyasi essentially have nothing, but they have a coffin, they have a stick, and they have a lota, they have a pot, right? That's what they have. So this person went and secretly switched all the coffins, one person's into another's pile, another person into one pile. So when these people came back, and the disciples came back, and then they started fighting with one another. You have my coffin, you have my coffin, this is my coffin, this is not your coffin, etc. Right? So they would all this was happening. Then Shripad Ramanujacharya arranged for the Grahastha couple, and he arranged that, he said that when the wife is sleeping, then you quietly go into that Grahastha couple's house and steal the jewelry from her body. So the disciple went into the house of this couple who were rich. The wife was sleeping, and quietly he started removing the jewelry from her body. So as he was removing the jewelry from the body, she turned. So he got scared, and then he ran away, and then he hid. So then in the meantime, the husband came, and the husband said, why are you only wearing jewelry in half your body? So then the wife said that it looks like these disciples of Ramanujacharya, now they themselves are disciples of Ramanujacharya. He said the disciples of Ramanujacharya are out of money because one of his disciples came, and while I was sleeping, he was actually removing the jewelry of my body. So the husband started getting upset, saying that, what happened then? She said, then I turned and then he ran away. So he got more upset. He said, why did you turn? Why didn't you let him steal all the jewelry if he needed it? And the wife said, he had already taken jewelry from half my body. I turned so that he could steal the jewelry from the other half of my body. So then Ramacharya makes this point that this couple, they were opulent, but they had no attraction to the opulence. The sannyasis, they had nothing, but they were attracted to that nothing. So it's not what you have or what you don't have, it is what that you are attracted to. Bharat Maharaj had a whole kingdom that he was not attracted to. And then he had a deer that he was attracted to. Right? So the object is inconsequential. What actually matters is how you interact with it. Okay, so I'll do one more verse, and then after that we'll pause for any discussion. Verse 14.
When Maharaj Bharat was actually worshipping the Lord, who was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony, although his activities were unfinished, he would still, at interval, get up and see where the deer was. In this way, he would look for it, and when he could see that the deer was comfortably situated, his mind and heart would be very satisfied, and he would bestow his blessing upon the deer, saying, my dear calf, may you be happy in all respect.
So the verse shows the path of decline. Initially, Bharat Maharaj was taking on a position of offering protection to the deer. That then morphed into Bharat Maharaj becoming extremely fond of the deer, to the point he was always accompanying him, playing with him, eating with him. Now the third thing that is happening, that he is giving up his spiritual practices, right? So this again is the insidious nature of fall. Like there's a famous example of the frog in a boiling water. Now, if there is boiling water, you put a frog in it, you'll jump out of it. But if you put the frog in regular water and gradually heat it up, even when the water is boiling, the frog is going to be there. So when the deer came into the life of Bharat Maharaj, on day one, he did not give up everything. Like it is mentioned that when he would perform his yagya, later on it comes, when he performed yagya, the deer would come and eat the grass. Or he would contaminate the offering, which means that he was doing it. He was still at least trying to do it. So the fall was gradual, to the point where Bharat Maharaj himself did not notice it. So earlier on, he was mentally prepared that protection of the deer is important for me. He was mentally prepared even if it interferes with my spiritual life. But now we see that here it is actually happening. So how could this have been prevented? If there was devotee association. So this happens with everyone. That people who take to devotion and give it up, they don't give it up in a day. They give it up in bits and portions. Maybe a little bit of this, maybe it first begins by, I don't have time to chant 16 rounds today, so I chant 10 rounds, and 6 rounds I'll chant tomorrow, so I'll do makeup rounds. So they start doing makeup rounds. Then the makeup rounds become so much that they say, well, better for me to chant good rounds and just be after the number game. So then the numbers decline. And gradually it happens that the person is continuously thinking that the decline is actually an elevation. So what protects is association over here. That somebody can say, Prabhu, you have to chant 60 rounds every day. Don't get into this makeup round because I've seen what happens. I've seen in other devotees what happens. Don't fall into that round. So we may not notice it, but those around us will notice it. Right? So two things that have come up. One is the importance of following rules and regulations. And the second is the importance of having Vaishnava Sangha. Prabhupada says that if one's mind is distracted from worship, a mere show of worship will not give any benefit. The fact that Bharat Maharaj had to get up at intervals to look for the deer was simply a sign that he had fallen down from the spiritual platform. Okay, so I'll pause here and see if there is any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It's not a question, basically need guidance. I don't know if it is a guidance or your perspective. We say we serve Krishna, like you brought up a good point earlier in the verse, I think, where someone may question why we opulently dress up Krishna, Radha Krishna, right? Radha Shams. Similarly, when we are attached to our family, we will give them the best, right? Like, for example, our kids. Oh, we would like them to be going to a best school. Or when we give it a car, best car, right? Like, but although at the same time we say that, oh, we are detached, we will be getting into that. Is it like, even not only from the family perspective, even from when we serve Krishna at the deity, when we dress up the deity, we will be giving the best. That is for Krishna, giving us own trouble, right? Like, for example, we give donations or whatever we are doing, right? So then when it comes to our own family as well, we do we will burn ourselves, but give the others. But even though how much of mix is there with doing for our family, because basic necessities are taken care, but we are at the hung up zone that, yeah, we wanted to give them the best. How do you reconcile this?
I think to some extent you reconcile it in the way you framed the question, that giving the best to Krishna is beneficial for our spiritual life. Giving the best to those that we are materially related to, not necessarily bad, as long as it does not take away our bhakti, as long as it does not impinge on our spiritual practice. So when we are taking care of those who we have some influence on, giving the best means that you give them along with spirituality. Like children you have influence on, spouse you have influence on, maybe your younger siblings you have influence on. So you can give them along with an opportunity to make spiritual advancement. Now, having said that, most of your family is beyond your preaching purview. It's the nature of world. Even Srila Prabhupada could not preach to his family. Right. Now, having said that, does not mean that we don't, but it's the nature of existence that no village considered, there's no sage in the village that they're born in. Right? So, having accepted that premise, what does one do? One takes care of their need and avoids taking care of their greed. So that establishes a good balance. So you don't want your loved ones wanting, especially if you have the ability. You don't want them wanting for something. So important to take care of the needs. But you can never take care of one person's greed because that is unending. It's something that even Krishna cannot take care of it. That Krishna cannot satisfy the greed of a person. So ideally speaking, if you're able to couple it with spiritual advancement, best case scenario. If not, then we do what is needed to at least see that they're not wanting for something. But it's a practical question that is obviously difficult for us, especially as grastas, difficult for us to unravel. So many bonds of affection that bind us at different levels.
Thank you, Prabhu. Basically, it's another question. It's a false attachments, right? Like we self-defined attachments, I can say, or it's a big topic, I think, attachment.
It's a big topic, yeah. One parting thought that I would want to leave you with is that, and this has been said often, that all devotees are good people. Not all good people are devotees, but all devotees are good people. Which means that a devotee will never be bad. They will never leave their family members wanting or in despair or in pain. So there are some people who take shelter of Krishna consciousness, thinking that, I'm advanced in Krishna consciousness. If my loved one, dear one is suffering, prarabdha karma, cycle of karma, etc. That's not how devotees work, right? Prabhupada would make this statement that all my disciples are perfect gentlemen. And there was this time when in Australia there was a building on fire, and the devotees went and they helped somebody. Somebody jumped off the top of the building, and the devotees, they had held some kind of a tarpaulin to hold that person, right? And then it came in the newspaper. Now there was no preaching, nothing over there. And then Prabhupada was very happy to read it. And he says, this is what happens, because all my devotees are gentlemen. They're always there to help. So that should be our guiding beacon. We should be a good person. We should help others, family, friends, the less fortunate ones. That's what a good person does, right? But the good person is within the realm of being a devotee first, and then a good person. But as you said, it's a topic in itself.
Prabhu, that was, I think they used Jagannath Rath cart cloth. I think it came on the news saying something along that line. The Jagannath saved the family, something like that along that line.
Okay.
That's my recollection. I don't know, I might be not accurate, but something along that line.
Okay, good. More details. I heard of this in a lecture, so I personally didn't know all the details, but thank you.
I have one question, but we don't have to answer now. It's already too late for you, Prabhu. How would you defend such a person who's questioning or challenging dressing the deities so opulently, expensive clothing while many people are suffering? So, is there a possibility to debate with them or convince them, or just leave it without saying anything? As I said, it may be a little long answer. You may have to give, or I don't know. Let me.
Yeah, I can give a couple of thoughts. Since I had faced this myself, I thought about it more so. First is that Prabhupada would say that people are starving not because of lack of anything. There's no lack of food. Like he would say, there is more than enough food to feed everybody. There's people are starving, people are lacking because of different reasons. They are. So whether you dress the deity opulently or not, people will still starve. Second is that you're objecting to a person giving money to dress a deity, but then you're not objecting to the same person who is going to a bar and probably spending same amount of money in taking intoxicants. So it is the person's decision to spend that money. How can you object to the person's decision to spend money at one place and not at another place? Right? And case in point, to the person who's objecting, that if you are so worried about the fact that people are starving, then why are you paying for your car or your house? Why are you paying for your children's education? If you're really committed to that, then give them that money. Right? Because you think that this is important for you. Giving money for your children is important for you. Living in a good house is important for you. Then there are people who consider that giving money to the deity, that is their belief. So how can you object to one and not object to second? And the third, of course, is the more philosophical perspective. Prabhupada would say that you serve the deity and everybody is served. When the deity eats opulently, then everybody eats opulently. You may feed with the money, you may feed the person one day, but if you feed the deity and other one person comes and takes darshan, then the person's problems are solved for good. So it's an answer that you give to somebody who is more spiritually inclined. That's how I process that. Prabhu. Okay,
Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. We will meet on Wednesday. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavi Vinodya. Anand Koti Vaishnavi. Srila Prabhupada.